Ooh, is there any process more fucking annoying than slutting data between two smartphones? Oh, hell. So anyway, of course, the Golden Stallion here with you for your July Star Trek update, which I thought this week was, or this at this point is a fitting time to get the Star Trek update in. I plan on doing future Star Trek updates with my co-hosts, so more of those will be coming, but this is one of those Star Trek updates where it's just me, and we're going to be covering a lot of the news. And holy shit, there is a lot of Star Trek news to cover, especially since the last time it was just you and I together, me between your ears, and you, well, I don't know, unless you interact on Patreon, I guess I don't really see you, or maybe if you interact on Instagram. But anyway, yeah, here, let me have a little sip of this Costa Rican coffee here. Boy, just, Wow, that just tastes like freedom, Costa Rica. Anyway. Transferring, I'm actually right now, just so you know, look at this. Listen to this. You're getting, look at this. I was going to turn my camera on. I was actually going to do video for the Star Trek update, but I didn't feel like putting clothes on, so I decided against it. Not that I have a problem being naked. It's certainly not now, but anyway, so I mentioned this on Sex and Science Hour this past week, which would have been season 6, episode 3, that I got a new phone. I got a Nokia 2, which is an Android Go phone, or well, it's going to be an Android Go phone. Before I do a full review of it, I'm actually going to wait for when the Android Oreo Go edition, that's the full name of the operating system. I'm going to talk about the Android Go operating system in a future Sovryn Tech. But before I do a review of the Nokia 2, I'm going to wait for it to get that update from Nokia, which I'm actually, and we're going to talk Star Trek, folks, relax. Though talking about smartphones, talking about cell phones in general, is certainly relevant to Star Trek, because without Star Trek, we might not have ever had them, or at least it would have been maybe another 100 years. Because for a lot of people, you really don't have something until, someone thinks of it, right? Until you know that it's there. But anyway, that's a whole other subject about creativity that I'm not going to get into now. So anyway, yeah, the Nokia 2, a sub $100 smartphone, actually for Amazon's little Prime Day that they were having on the 16th. Of course, this is getting recorded on July 17th, 2018. So yesterday, and I guess it kind of melded into today as well. They actually had the Nokia 2 on sale for like $80, which is about $20 off what it normally costs. Of course, I didn't pay $100 for mine, but regardless, this is I'll say quickly before we get into the Star Trek stuff. So the Nokia 2, now granted, I put in, and this is where things get funny, right? Because it's not really a sub $100 phone, because I put in an SD card, which was 128 gigabyte SD card. So that really turns it into more like a $140 phone, right? It's not really $100, which then you have to ask, okay, wait, is it really worth it when you have to put in an SD card like that? Well, not everybody just has 128 gigabyte SD cards laying around. I had that for another purpose. And so, it's just laying around and available to be put in. So I guess, anyway, you get my point. So with the Nokia 2, a couple things about it that I was really going for was that I kind of wanted a phone that's a little more limited, and this is pretty limited. It only has like 8 gig of onboard storage. That's why I slapped in the 128 gig SD card. But that SD card, all it's going to hold is, like photos and audiobooks, and all of that. I probably won't even hold music, because I can use Pandora or whatever for that. And it'll hold podcasts, and you just direct every app, to put it on the SD card and everything. So, but it's an interesting little phone, and it's slow as fuck. It's new, but it's slow as fuck. But the nice thing is that actually it won't just get Android Oreo Go. It's going to get Android P as well, or at least Nokia has claimed that they are guaranteeing that it will get updates up to Android 9 effectively, which that's Android P is Android 9. So, interesting stuff, and something that I'll talk about and that I need to be able to talk about, because I do write the books on Android security. I need to, really know my shit when it comes to Android. And so that was part of my reason for getting this. But my other phone was having a real problem, and I didn't want to spend money on anything too serious right now, because I think there's going to be some pretty dramatic changes coming up for Android throughout 2019. So I just went with something cheap and something that'll get me by. I mean, I have my Nexus tablet, where if I need to run anything a little more serious, I can do that. So it's not really a problem. But regardless, I look forward to reviewing the phone and talking to you about it more. And what Android Go means and all of this. Like I said, I will do a review probably of the OS in an actual Sovryn Tech Prime episode. As to a review of the Nokia 2 itself, that might actually be Patreon content. So good for you for being patrons. And of course, thank you to all of you for being patrons. You help make all this content go round and round. And of course, it was great to do. Got some interesting and some very positive response as usual. Of course, we had the episode with myself, Stephanie, and Ellen this past week. Episode 286 of Sovryn Tech Prime. And that's always a good time. And, glad that everybody enjoyed that. So, okay, in fact, I think we quoted Star Trek in that episode, which, of course, is a Sovryn Tech tradition, and which is why we do the Star Trek update. If you are a new patron, I know I have some new patrons. If you're a new patron, the Star Trek update is where I cover, I pretty much just talk up Star Trek, just like we do a Star Wars update where we talk up Star Wars with my co-host Robin. The Star Trek update is where I just talk up some Star Trek, Discovery, things are hot and happening with that. We're going to talk about that, but there's actually a whole lot going on with Star Trek. And the Star Trek update is going to become more and more important over time, as we will talk about in the various news this month for July. In fact, it might get so prevalent that doing it once a month might not be enough. So there's the chance that I might end up doing the Star Trek update twice a month at the rate that things are going. But I'll review the comic books. I will review the books. I will talk about all the latest news. And of course, if we're in the middle of where, Star Trek Discovery is during a season, or there's a new movie out or something like that, which we talked about the last time you and I were alone. I talked about how there are 2 Star Trek movies planned. Well, it turns out there's a lot more. We're going to get into that. And I'll review the movies. And maybe sometimes, when I have co-hosts, we'll just talk up, what's like the best stuff in Star Trek, what's the best moments and things like this, where we do our top 3 reviews of various series, and we talk about various series. So, anyway, I know a lot of you love the Star Trek update, and that's why I keep talking about it. And if you think that I'm going to complain about sitting down in the BDSM studio here and starting to talk about Star Trek, you're fucking crazy. Of course, I'm happy to do that. Anytime, baby. Anytime. So I mentioned that we do book reviews. Why don't we open this up with a book review? So the book to review for this month, it actually came out in early June, and I read it then, and it's Star Trek Discovery, Fear Itself by James Swallow. Now, I mainly concentrate, for those that are new, I mainly concentrate on the Star Trek Discovery novels as far as reviews. And the reason for that is because the Star Trek Discovery novels actually have bearing on canon, which that's important because I generally don't want to read Star Trek novels that, don't have a whole lot to do with anything, right? Or, that don't have any bearing on the broader universe. I think that that's important. I think that that's been a major selling point for a lot of Star Trek content lately, especially for Star Trek Discovery content, because it is what they call tie-in, meaning that, well, the ultimate canon is still the show, what gets done on TV or in the movies, but if it's not contradictory, the tie-in is still completely legitimate, and they do work with the writer's room at Star Trek Discovery. And I'm sure that's going to be the case across any other Star Trek properties kind of going forward. And it's been true, as well with the Kelvin timeline, which are like the J.J. Abrams movies, where a lot of the comic books and everything that IDW was doing for the Kelvin timeline were actually attached. They'd even get referenced within the Star Trek movies themselves. So, it just gives you incentive to really be into this stuff. Now, Star Trek Discovery, Fear Itself, again, the novel that came out in June by James Swallow, very unfortunate name, is, here's maybe the best way to open up talking about it. I'm not really going to get into spoiler territory, but there's not much really to spoil. I mean, there's nothing, it's not like there's been interesting tidbits within the previous 2 Star Trek Discovery novels that I've really, really appreciated. I'll just say it. I read this a month ago. just about over a month ago, I had this finished. I had it finished within a day because I listen to, or I generally consume, especially fiction, I consume usually through Audible or through an audiobook form, whatever. And I listen to it at 2.3, 2.5x, and I take it in and I'll have, what equates to a 9 or 10 or 12 hour book inside of 5-6 hours, and or even less. And boom, so I'm done inside of a day. Like as soon as these books come out, I'm waiting for it. I usually have them pre-ordered and I'm good to go, which by the way, we don't know. I don't think we have any information on the fourth, on another novel within Star Trek Discovery, which is pretty unfortunate, but that doesn't mean we won't have Star Trek audiobooks to talk about in the future. I'll get to those in a minute. But bottom line being is I read this a month and a half ago and it's totally forgettable. Like, I mean, I get, if I sit down and I really think about what happened in it, okay, like I can remember what went down in the book, but really there's nothing special here. Like it's like, yeah, okay, yeah, what happened in that? Like, what was that book about? So that's not to say it was bad. Actually, James Swallow is a fine author, and the writing was fantastic. I mean, certainly I, applaud anybody really that can get published in that way. Well, I applaud almost anybody that can get published in that way. I don't applaud the person that wrote 50 Shades of Grey because, I mean, I think I'm a better writer than that. But James Swallow, fine writer, a great writer, actually. I mean, not greatest, not a Harlan Ellison or anything, but certainly, just a fine writer. And the book is, very much feels like Star Trek. There are references in it to various points of canon, in fact, including to species that you only get in, say, one episode or so of The Next Generation, which I thought was a nice touch. I like that. I've been really enjoying, one of the greatest things about Star Trek Discovery is how much fealty it's been paying to the broader canon of the Prime timeline of Star Trek, which the Prime timeline is, Next Generation, Original Series, DS9, Voyager, all that, and Enterprise, of course. But Enterprise is shared between the Prime and the Kelvin timeline, so you usually don't mention that. So that was a nice touch. This is mainly a Saru book. This is all about Saru. And it does, it has to do with the Shenzhou. So you're getting Captain Georgiou. Michael Burnham's in it, which a lot of people love that character. You get more of Michael Burnham. She's certainly a major part of the novel. So if you love that character, and I know a lot of people do, I appreciate Michael Burnham. This is also a book that you'll enjoy. But Saru has really been, for Star Trek Discovery in the broader sense, Saru has been a runaway hit. Like, people really love this character, and they really, really like explorations of this character. And if you are that kind of person, then yes, this book is for you, because there are interesting insights into Kelpians, which is Saru's species. There are, there's interesting insights into, Kelpians as a species, as well as Saru as a character himself. Maybe one of the most memorable things about the book, I mean, it more or less has to do with this, trying to figure out, is this species enslaving another species, whatever. I mean, the plot is kind of meaningless. Really, the point of this book is just to give you a lot of Saru, okay? So the plot overall is, which isn't true for the previous two books from Star Trek Discovery. Like, I thought Drastic Measures, or Desperate Hour Desperate Hour and Drastic Measures, the two previous books, the plots were, I mean, not humdrum, but I mean, it had so many great character moments, and the plots had so many cool moments to them that they were very worthwhile. This is not so with this book. This book is really, if you just want to know about maybe more about Michael Burnham, maybe a little more Georgiou, and certainly a whole shit ton of Saru, then this is interesting to read, but only for that purpose, okay? For example, and I mean, you could say this is a spoiler, I don't think so, but you find out, like, when Michael Burnham is trying to figure out what's going on with Saru, because it seems like Saru is sort of going, maybe a traitor or going rogue at a certain point in this. When you find out about that, or when she's exploring this possibility, you have where she goes into Saru's quarters. And when she enters Saru's quarters aboard the Shenzhou, like, this holographic creature attacks her. She doesn't know it's a hologram, though. And she starts flipping out. And, and then, of course, realizes that it's not real or whatever. And she more or less, you kind of figure out that Kelpians are or at least Saru is constantly training himself to deal with his fearful nature as a what's the term that I'm looking for? Because Kelpians they're not predators as a prey species. That's what I'm looking for. As a species that is used to being prey on their planet. Okay, so where humans are kind of top of the food chain right on Earth, Kelpians are prey on their planet. Okay, and so that's what makes them kind of an interesting species to explore philosophically, and you get a lot of insight into that in this book. That is interesting, but I didn't feel like it really added much, and it's just completely forgettable. Like I listened to it, and you don't get any great payoff. Like with Desperate Hours, you got more Pike and Spock, right? And you even got to learn more about Number One, which was Michelle Barrett Roddenberry's character in The Cage, in the original pilot for the original pilot for the original series. Like that was all very interesting, and you got to explore her character more and all these other characters that from The Cage. Then with Drastic Measures, you got that payoff at the end about what's going on with maybe the Prime Lorca, right? Not Mirror Lorca, but Prime Lorca. You got the payoff of getting to see the Enterprise again under Robert April. I mean, and there was interesting stuff done with the Betazoid character in that, and you got a lot more of you got a lot of Prime Lorca. I mean, like there was interesting stuff. There were interesting little tidbits and things to pull away from those books. This one, I feel like there's nothing to pull away from it. I mean, you get some more about the Tholians, which that's nice. I'm all about that. Injecting more original series stuff. You do get to explore some of the Tholians, but it's just not enough. It doesn't give you enough meat. This is, out of the 3 books, this is the one, if you want to just skip one and you don't have time, this is the one you can skip. Unless you really love the character of Saru, then you're going to love this book. But that's kind of the main takeaway with Fear. It's with the book Fear itself. Again, it's serviceable. It is what it is, but it's just, there's nothing to it. It's not memorable at all. Anyway, link in the show notes if you want to get a copy of that, be it the book, the ebook or the audiobook, whatever you want to do. It's in there. So for the Star Trek update. All right. Now, like I said earlier, that there are other, generally I don't cover a lot of other books, but a series that I will be reviewing for a few different reasons is Star Trek Prometheus, which I have. So here's an interesting thing. Most Star Trek books, and this is really weird, most Star Trek books are licensed through Simon & Schuster. Okay, almost all of them, including the Star Trek Discovery books. Like everything gets done through Simon & Schuster. It's been that way for decades. However, a company called Titan Books there's a trilogy of books written, and it was originally released in Germany and only in Germany, and then they got translated, I'm guessing Titan Books is a European company. So, but anyway, it got translated into English, and they've been releasing these books, this Prometheus trilogy. They started in 2017, 2 books deep now in 2018, and the third book is coming out, In the Heart of Chaos, is coming out later this year in 2018. So I've bought these books as they came out because I love, of course, the ship, the Prometheus, the USS Prometheus, was first introduced in Star Trek Voyager. And it's this wildly advanced starship that can split into like 4, just a stupid amount of ships. And it's kind of like its own fleet. And it's arguably the most powerful Starfleet ship ever built, or at least at the time of, within the later 24th century. And I'm such a big fan. I have my little Eagle Moss Star Trek Prometheus just above me, actually, here in the BDSM studio, amongst a bunch of other Eagle Moss ships, which, by the way, real quick, I am really excited. Probably the next ship I'm going to get that Eagle Moss is coming out with, there's a whole slew that they're going to release throughout the end of 2018 of their little models that they do through their subscription service. But then they also have, of course, shop exclusives that they put out there. But they've done their XL series where they release larger editions, like 10 to 11 to 12 inch editions of various starships that they've released before. They're doing an XL edition of the Enterprise B, as in, barricade. B as in barricade. Everybody knows what that quote's from. The Enterprise B from Star Trek Generations, they are going to be releasing that. I want that. I always thought that updated Excelsior class look And I remember having the Micro Machine of it growing up. I always thought that looked so slick. And where it almost looked like the Enterprise D, it kind of gave you a bridge between those two, or where it looked like a little bit like the Ambassador class, which is what the Enterprise C would end up being as far as class. I always thought that looked really, really cool. Like it just, I don't know, it just seemed more hulking and tougher. So I'm excited for that. That's one of my favorite designs, and a ship that really deserves some exploration, I think, within stories and novels. And I know Captain Harriman's has been in various Star Trek novels in the past, but I'd like to see a little something extra. So anyway, Star Trek Prometheus trilogy. An interesting thing with this. So now, not a lot of all the Star Trek Discovery books have been getting released as audiobooks on Audible. Now, there's a long history of Simon & Schuster Audio, which is separate from Audible, of release of doing audiobooks of Star Trek books, and to varying degrees of greatness, shall we say, because a lot of times they would do abridged versions of these books. And some of these are available on Audible itself. Simon & Schuster has gone through Audible for releases of some of these things, or re-releases. Like you can get the entire Shatnerverse, which are all the Star Trek books done by William Shatner. They're all abridged, but you can get those through Audible. And of course, they were releasing those back when books were still on tape, right? But also the Star Trek books, and including the Shatnerverse, is when Simon & Schuster started to experiment with putting in sound effects into their books and music and everything, which has, really helped out. And I'll tell you, with the Shatnerverse books, the audiobook versions of those, I think you lose a lot. Like, you definitely want to read those. Or, I mean, it's great. It's great to have Shatner reading them, and he does, and he's brilliant, of course. But I think you miss a lot of the really cool shit that happens in his books when you consume them in an abridged form as compared to unabridged. But, they've done, I mean, like they released the Captain Sulu books, Cacophony and all that. When George Takei read those were well done. But anyway, Simon & Schuster hasn't really been pushing for a lot of audiobook versions of Star Trek books until recently. Star Trek Discovery has been getting, every one of theirs has been an audiobook, and then they've been releasing some of the DS9 and Voyager and Next Gen and original series books as audiobooks, going forward. But it's really been kind of rare stuff. Now, interestingly, with Star Trek Prometheus, Big Finish Productions, they have done Big Finish Productions, probably best known for doing Doctor Who and, of course, the spin-off series Torchwood and all that. Probably best known for doing those books, even though they've done so much more, where they have released audiobooks or audio adventures that don't even have a companion novel to them, or companion novelization, where they have done audio plays, audio dramas, whatever, for Doctor Who and other series for the past, they've been doing this for quite a few years now. And they do a tremendous job. They'll usually get like an actor to do the read and everything, or they just get, some fantastic, narrator to pull it off. But Big Finish is actually independent of Audible. I think there might have been a little while where they were licensing through Audible, and then they dropped out, and now they're doing all of it on their own, which, I wish everything was in my Audible app. I wish everything was in one app, honestly, but it's not. And so whatever, I have on my Android phones, I have a smart audiobook player anyway to handle that. So anyway, Big Finish is, I mean, they've done, so many great things. Like they've done SG-1 books, and they had like Michael Shanks doing the reading for those. They've done Highlander books. Probably the best thing for me that they've done in the past is they did audiobooks and some audio plays of Blake 7, which is one of my favorite shows. I mean, it's a science fiction show, but one of my favorite shows of all time. A show really, really ahead of its time, quite frankly. So, they've done all that, and now they got some kind of weird deal, I'm guessing through Titan Books, where obviously through Titan Books, where they can actually do the release and the recording, the whole thing, the whole production and selling of the Star Trek Prometheus trilogy, not through Simon & Schuster. Very weird. Very, very weird. But they did it, and they've already put out the first two books of the Prometheus trilogy, Fire with Fire and The Root of All Rage. And they're going to release after the third book comes out in the States, they are going to release that. Now, you can buy them, and again, you don't get them through Audible. Audible doesn't have them. You have to get them through Big Finish, okay? I'll put maybe if I think of it, I'll get a link in the show notes for them. You can buy all three, where you'll get the first two now, and then when the third one comes out, I think in like December or something of 2018, you'll get the third one automatically, and you can get it for like a discounted price. If you buy the entire trilogy, you get it for like $30. So as soon as I heard about it, I was on top of it. I'm like, oh, absolutely, I want these. And so far, I started into Fire with Fire, and it's great. It's a great production. I mean, I expected absolutely nothing less from Big Finish, because they're one of the best audio drama / audiobook companies in the world, if not the best. Next to like Audible Studios or something. And totally worth it. So I will be reviewing those. I don't know if I'm going to wait to review the whole trilogy. Maybe I'll do one book at a time over the next couple months to make sure we have a little something extra to talk about within the Star Trek update. And then by the time that December rolls around and the third one's out, I'll be right on time and we'll be all caught up and we can talk about it. But I started reading these books, when they were just coming out as novels. I didn't know there was going to be audiobooks of them. Ironically, the German audiobook versions are on Audible. Just the English ones aren't. Weird as shit in the world. Confusing as fuck. But I'm excited. I'm glad that they're out there, and I've enjoyed these books so far. So anyway, let's move on from that into our next bit of business for the Star Trek update. And now, this is one of the major stories that I really wanted to talk about, because this is a big deal. And this story is actually from June 19th. I have a link for it from TrekCore, which is kind of my favorite Star Trek news site. Definitely check them out. They do great work. Actually, I don't even know if it's a they. It might just be one person. I should get in touch with them. But anyway, Alex Kurtzman, who has been working on Star Trek Discovery, and is like one of the only major production guys with Star Trek Discovery that's still working with Star Trek Discovery. I don't know if I talked about this before or if I had it listed, but they Gretchen Byrne and the other guy there, Aaron Berg and not Gretchen Wilson, whatever. Anyway, the two main producers, which I talked about, Aaron Berg. I didn't like the guy. Aaron Harberts and Gretchen Berg. That's it. Aaron Harberts. Jeez, took me a second. Aaron Harberts. I don't like that guy. He was on After Trek, which is the post show for every episode of Star Trek Discovery that they were doing for season 1. The guy just seemed skeezy, not sleazy, skeezy. Sleazy's can be a positive thing. He just seems skeezy, like something's not right about this guy. And apparently he was flipping out on people, and he was like screaming and yelling in the writer's room, and they were going to contact HR about him and everything. And Gretchen Berg was sort of his underling, which she seemed nice enough, but I did not like him. And so he's gone. And I think, Kurtzman is pretty much running everything right now. And in fact, not only that, he just signed, and this is the major news that we want to talk about. So those people are gone. So a lot of the production team, Brian Fuller had already left for varying reasons that we don't exactly know the reality around, blah, blah, blah. But you've got one guy running all this stuff, which not that that's a bad thing, okay, to have one guy with a vision, right? That as far as entertainment goes, and when you're dealing with a franchise, not a bad idea at all. But Alex Kurtzman is going to be, who also worked on the Kelvin timeline stuff. He got signed he got offered and signed it, a 5-year deal by CBS to make a whole ton of projects. So now, the last time we did the Star Trek update together, we talked about how Nick Meyer, how he was offered to do, and it's still on the table, he's offered and agreed to do, but just they're kind of like holding off on it, I'm guessing because of a potential CBS Paramount conglomerate, or acquisition, I should say, that's going to happen. They're waiting on that. But Nick Meyer was offered to do a trilogy of movies. Now, we don't know that that's movies in theaters. It might be movies on TV, right, or on CBS All Access, where it could be exclusive to that. And, I'm going to bring up a quick point that actually relates to the Wednesday Q&A that we did last week, which I think was something like Movie Passing Gas, I think was the title of it. So with the potential theory that I laid out, that MoviePass could effectively could become a theater monopoly, okay, a cinema monopoly. I think that this points at, we'll get back to talking about Alex Kurtzman. I think that points at, with MoviePass, that maybe the reason that you have like CBS or that you have Disney and all these other people, that they're looking to do their own streaming services is because they know they might not be able, unless they give, say, MoviePass, if MoviePass's plans pan out, or what I think are their plans, what I theoretically think they're going to do, which is eventually they're going to buy out and franchise all of these, theaters across the country. And, who knows where it expands beyond that. They might have to take a cut, or, like MoviePass might force the movie studios to say, oh, if you want your movie in our theaters, you're going to have to give us 20% of the profits or something. Okay. MoviePass, because of that, they might want to, this could get really interesting, where major productions, and this is already sort of happening with Netflix, right? But major productions, and one could argue with HBO as well, I guess, but major productions could end up being released solely on streaming services. And there's really no reason for it not to, because, the average person takes their stolen money refund, or sorry, your tax refund, and, they buy a 50, 60, 70 inch or whatever stupid size screen. And it's as good as a movie experience in many ways, right? So they might end up where, like, CBS All Access might do major movie releases, major productions, and just put them only on their streaming service. I think Disney's going to do that as far as with Star Wars, and probably Marvel too. And to some degree that makes sense, right? Like I can see where they would want to do that. That way they don't rely upon the cinema industry that's being invaded by Netflix. Already said that they're going to create their own cinemas and, like their own buildings, the whole thing. Or they might buy out, like, little ones in various parts of rural America or less than urban America. And then, of course, build their own within urban America. And then you have MoviePass, doing whatever horseshit that they're going to do. So these are both, real potentialities that they have to consider. So, Nick Meyer's trilogy might be something made only for CBS All Access, just like Alex Kurtzman's stuff. Now, there's not a whole ton of details, but he signed on to potentially do other TV shows, movies, all this stuff that's going to be going on with CBS. Now, the CBS Paramount, melding hasn't happened yet, or the merger, I guess I should say, hasn't happened yet. Okay. So this is stuff that they're planning to do right now, and Kurtzman's on top of it. Now, I'm more than excited. We don't have a whole ton of, there's the rumor going around that Patrick Stewart is in talks with CBS to reprise his role as Captain Picard for something. Either some people were saying originally they thought that it was going to be season 2 of Discovery, that somehow he would show up in that, which, hey, great. Or that he's going to actually get his own, maybe a movie or a TV show, which I'm also totally on board with. Because again, if Star Trek Nemesis, way back, what was that, 2002? When Star Trek Nemesis came out, the Next Generation movie Nemesis, they had said, was it Mangles, Martin and Mangles there? They said that if the movie did well enough, that they had major plans for what they were going, really big plans for what they were going to do with the Next Generation crew and story after that. The thing is, Nemesis bombed. Like, it did not do well at all, and it was panned and blah, 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 even though I enjoyed the movie just fine. So maybe they're going to go forward with that. Maybe those plans that were originally drawn up, because it sounded like they had some pretty solid stuff and like areas that they wanted to go in. Maybe they're going to continue on with that and give Patrick Stewart, a new vehicle, as in a TV show or a movie or whatever. I am so on board with that. Please give it to me. So there's going to be, bottom line being, with this Alex Kurtzman 5-year deal, there's going to be a lot of new Star Trek, like a shit ton of new Star Trek. Can things change in pretty short order? Sure. But they'd have to buy out Alex Kurtzman, and I can't imagine that was cheap, because he is a known quantity with Star Trek and a respected one. You're going to want to hold on to that, especially when you're losing everybody else on your production teams. Even though, the writing team's fine. Like, Kirsten Beyer, who is a very important person, is still involved. Nick Meyer, they're still kind of like, holding on to latchkey. But yeah, you're going to want to hold on to Kurtzman. So I can't picture that they're going to want to cancel that or do a crazy buyout or something if all of these plans are going to fall through and not actually go through. But yeah, really exciting stuff. So link in the show notes if you want to read more about that. Now, throughout the past couple months, we've been getting little leaks here and there of visual content from season 2 of Star Trek Discovery, which of course is getting a season 2 and will likely get a season 3. Let's be clear here. If CBS is feeling confident enough to do 5-year deals and, is putting out there that, oh yeah, we're going to have all these projects, there's all these projects, blah, blah, blah. Discovery is very much the flagship of a lot of this. And because Discovery worked so well, I'm sure is what's giving them their confidence. So it's a pretty good bet we're going to get a season 3. And if you weren't the biggest fan of season 1, well, it's true that it can take a Star Trek show a couple years at least to get its footing, right? So season 3 is when things should get hot. But season 2, we've been getting some looks at things, including the fact that we know, because of the season 1 finale, spoiler alerts for Star Trek Discovery, that we're going to get the Enterprise. And we're going to see the Enterprise, and there's going to be some stuff going on. And we do know for a fact that we're going to be getting in the Enterprise because one of the first still images from that's been released, and I think it was originally in Entertainment Weekly, includes a shot of Michael Burnham herself on the Enterprise and actually going into Spock's quarters. And it's Spock's quarters based upon, it actually says, 3F125 1701. And that'd be Lieutenant Commander Spock at the time, not full Commander Spock like he would be in the original series. Of course, this is under Captain Pike, and we already talked about is it not Anson Wilson, but whatever. Anyway, the guy playing Pike, looked great. We talked about that in previous Star Trek updates. There's also a still of a Sovryn character, which is interesting because now a Sovryn character, there's that big scene in Star Trek: The Motion Picture, and I've talked about this already many times on the Star Trek Update about how really Discovery is borrowing a lot from 70s science fiction and really a lot from Star Trek: The Motion Picture as far as design cues. Now, the doorways and everything that you're seeing aboard what must be the Constitution-class USS Enterprise for Star Trek Discovery looks a lot like what you end up seeing of the Enterprise in Star Trek: The Motion Picture. Whether you want to agree with that or not, I mean, again, in these stills, the way the doorways are set up and the hallways are set up, again, the Discovery looked very much like what you would eventually see of the corridors in Star Trek: The Motion Picture. I mean, that's a whole other situation. We really won't know how it feels until we get a complete picture of that. Of course, the exterior of the Constitution-class Enterprise looked a lot like it was taking design cues more from the show Enterprise, from the show Star Trek Enterprise, with the way that the nacelles had the blue hue, barred hues on the interior and all that. But anyway, we have a Sovryn character who was originally in that huge scene on the wreck deck of Star Trek: The Motion Picture. So once again, they're borrowing elements. I said this. I was like, they're just taking stuff whole cloth from Star Trek: The Motion Picture, which isn't a bad thing for me because it's my favorite Star Trek movie. Okay, but they took the Sovryn character, and there's going to be some kind of Sovryn character within season 2 of Star Trek Discovery, and the Sovryn character is wearing a Discovery style, shall we say, a Discovery style uniform, not a Enterprise or Constitution class style uniform. So maybe he's a crew member of the Discovery. I'm not sure. All of that is up to guesswork. But we did get a look at least the potential of what uniforms are going to look like aboard the USS Enterprise NCC 1701 in season 2 of Discovery. We saw Captain Pike. We kind of see him from behind. And the uniform looks more or less, it looks a lot like what you ended up seeing in Star Trek Beyond, in the Kelvin timeline show, Star Trek Beyond. And you got this, it was weird that there was, what would you call it exactly? There was a little teaser, not really a trailer, but I guess we'll call it a trailer. There's a production trailer. How about that? A teaser, a production teaser. That's the term I'm going to run with. There was a production teaser, which these are very popular now with various, productions, movies, TV shows, and everything on YouTube, where we saw some art and you see all you see is kind of the breast of it, of what the female Starfleet uniform will look like aboard the Enterprise NCC 1701 in Star Trek Discovery Season 2. And the interesting thing is they're all skirted uniforms, which is a very important thing for me. That was such a big thing that I wanted. It's please just give us the skirts, at some point, because I think that they're so rebellious and also sexy within Star Trek. They certainly were in the 60s, and you want to pay, homage, to that. But there's designs where the skirt is actually black, which would fit in with what you see in, I guess that'd be Star Trek V. or maybe Star Trek 5 or maybe Star Trek 5 and 6, or maybe Star Trek 6, the movie where Uhura is wearing, they have like the more naval styled uniforms with the full sleeve and everything. And she has like a black skirt on with, knee high boots and all that, and she looks great, especially for being, such an older woman in it. But anyway, so you have, there might be a black skirt as to where instead of it being an all the same color skirt, like say if the uniform was red, like Uhura wears in the original series of Star Trek, she has a red mini skirt as well. Also, the skirts don't look that mini. At least most of them don't within this, though there are differing lengths. And some of them have leggings, like where there's like black stockings or something, underneath the skirt. So it'll be interesting to see which design they actually end up going with. All of them do have full sleeves. Which is fine because that's more or less what we had in the original series, and it's what we'd end up having in the Kelvin timeline by Star Trek Beyond. So the uniforms look totally fine. I'm not seeing anything that bothers me, bottom line, with what's been put out so far for Star Trek Discovery Season 2. No problem at all, and I'm just excited for it. And again, we won't be seeing it until 2019, but I imagine it'll be pretty early on in 2019. So, okay, let's not much else really to say on that. Just that, yeah, we're going to get some Spock, we're going to get some Enterprise, and we know that. And hey, let's see what happens with that. Talking about the comic books, so I did a review for the bulk of the comic series that have come out so far. Next month, I'll probably do a much larger one because we'll end up getting the last part of Star Trek Discovery Succession, which has been a very interesting comic series that all takes place in the Mirror universe. I will be covering that. It's just a 4-issue miniseries. I'll be covering all of those in next month's Star Trek update. But we also have, and this is an interesting announcement and one that I just love, like because it's two of my favorite franchises finally mashing up. But IDW, now we talked about it, been a huge shakeup at IDW as far as what's going on with Star Trek. And that shakeup has led people to wonder, like, wait, is IDW even going to continue to do Star Trek comics? Because after Succession, which I just mentioned, after that ends with issue 4, there have not been any announcements as far as any future Star Trek Discovery comic books. Now, that's not too unheard of, because also we don't really have, as far as I know, we don't have any announcements from Simon & Schuster as far as, are we going to get any more Star Trek Discovery novels? We don't know. All this stuff is kind of being held up. Maybe it has to do with the writing team figuring stuff out for season 2 of Discovery, and they don't want to, have massive contradictions, because again, I think that the novels and the comics for Discovery have been selling so well because they are labeled as tie-in, and so you're getting the hardcore Star Trek fans who, there's a hardcore Star Trek fan base that will read the Star Trek novels, right? But then there's the hardcore fan base that won't, because it doesn't mean anything to the universe. With Discovery, like I mentioned earlier in the show, it's different. These things do have bearing, or at least they, it's something that you can say is official, right? Or canon. So maybe they're holding off on that, before they figure all of that stuff out. I don't know. But regardless, we are going to get, and I think this is really cool, and obviously this isn't, I don't know that it's obvious, but this more or less won't be canon, but that's okay. It's still going to be a ton of fun. And since it's a comic book, you can consume it pretty quickly, and you don't have to invest the amount of time that you would into a novel, which, why invest so much time when in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't mean much, unless it's like a really fun novel and, you just want to do it to imagine the possible adventure of Kirk or Picard and crew. But they announced this towards the end of June, but IDW is going to be doing this fall. They're going to do a Trek versus Transformers, and that's the title, Trek versus Transformers. And they already have some of the cover artwork and everything, and is it a stunner. So Trek versus the Transformers, and I mean it. Optimus Prime, Megatron, the whole thing, and you get Megatron, you get Optimus Prime, you got Bumblebee, Starscream, and Megatron are there, and the Klingons are on the side of the Decepticons within this, according to the cover artwork anyway, and that's all we've got. Link is in the show notes if you want to see it for yourself. And the Klingons are based upon, all of the Star Trek characters, and I thought this was a really nice touch, because Transformers are best known for their 80s cartoon series, the Generation 1 cartoon series in the States, IDW decided to go with using, as far as, okay, how are you going to combine these? How are you going to combine the artwork of like the drawn characters of Kirk, Spock, and Uhura, and whoever, with the cartoonish Transformers? Well, they came up with the perfect idea. They're going to use the stylings and the animation, the animation style of the animated series of Star Trek, the animated series from the 70s, and mix it in with the animation style of the 80s Transformers. And it looks great. It looks perfect. It was a brilliant move on their part. And not only that, but we're also going to get, because on some of the other covers, Emrys is a Kitane, or Katan, whatever, alien, which she's feline. Okay. And I thought this was she's such a really cool character and she's only from the animated series. And I'll tell you, if Discovery was going to do anything, I wish they would bring in the Kitane race into the picture. And, you don't have to bring in Emrys if you don't want to. Maybe Emrys's mom, I don't know. But you could bring in Emrys because, well, it might fit. She's a lieutenant by the time of the animated series on the Enterprise. So she'd have to be an ensign at some point, right? Just graduating Starfleet Academy, or maybe in Starfleet Academy at the time of Discovery. I think that'd be pretty cool. But anyway, she's definitely going to be a major part of it, or it looks like by the covers that she's going to be a major part of it. And I think that that's fantastic. So I love this amalgamation of the animated series of Star Trek and Transformers. And I think this is going to be a really cool story. Star Trek has done very well in the past in various comic book series with crossovers. I didn't care much for the Doctor Who one. I wish they would have done it with a different doctor. But like when they did it with Star Trek and the X-Men, back when Marvel was publishing Star Trek comics in the late 90s, that's one of the best comic series ever done, in my opinion. So I think this is going to be really cool. And I'm such a huge Transformers fan. You have no idea. Like Generation 1 Transformers and Beast Wars. I like Beast Wars a lot as well. I can't wait to see this. Can't wait to read it. I'm going to have a lot of fun with this. And Star Trek, the animated series, I really love that show. It's maybe the most underwatched thing by your average Star Trek fan, but I totally recommend watching it. I have the Blu-rays just above me, and well worthwhile actually getting your hands on those if you want. I think it's a lot of fun, and it's Star Trek, and there's thought-provoking stuff in it. So yeah, Star Trek versus Transformers, that's going to be really cool when that comes out in the fall of 2018. I don't think they gave an actual issue count. Maybe it's going to be a 4-issue. Okay, it is going to be a 4-issue, written by John Barber and Mike Johnson, who's been doing Star Trek stuff forever. So that's I'm totally on board with this coming out. So anyway, great stuff with the comics. And the other thing, I love the classic Klingon look from the original series and from the animated series. So I'm all about that coming back. In fact, I was just having a conversation about it the other day, how much I enjoy them. My bathrobe is actually a classic, an original series Klingon uniform bathrobe. So I'm down with this. And finally we get to see maybe some, because there's a Klingon woman. This is them without the ridges, right? There's a Klingon woman on there, which it'll be cool to explore that and see what uniform design they go with for the Klingon woman as far as that goes. So, okay, I think that pretty much covers all the news and reviews, even though we only did one major review, and that was for Star Trek Fear Itself. Again, link is in the show notes if you want to get a copy of that, and that'll go through the stuff.sexandsciencehour.com link. If you want to do that, please do check out, of course, Sex and Science Hour. We are back, baby, and you're going to want to hear it. But anyway, throughout July, got other great content coming to you. So we'll wrap this up. That's it for the Star Trek update. Star Trek's future looking fucking bright as hell. And I couldn't be happier because Star Trek is, I always say Babylon 5 is the greatest show ever made, and it is. And under that would probably be Spartacus. But Star Trek just always stands as the full measuring stick of all entertainment for me. So anyway, that's it for this Star Trek update. Other stuff coming out through July, some surprises, some things that may be related to Star Trek, we'll see. And of course, there'll be quite a few more entries into the book that we're doing for Sovereign Tech First University, which is Emotions of Normal People by William Moulton Marston. More parts of that will be out. And, of course, you'll get your Q&As, Relationship Rhombus, all kinds of fun shows yet to come out through July. So, and, of course, your Star Wars update will be coming too. So, anyway, that's our Star Trek update for July 2018. All the stuff that's fit to talk about. I will see all of you on the other side.